Next up is Dr. Anthony Cortese. He is the founder and president of Second Nature, and he is developing a national capacity to make sustainable action a foundation in higher education. The thing you don't know is, though, that 32 years ago, Dr. Anthony Cortese had leukemia. He was just becoming the state environmental department, the head of the environmental department for Massachusetts, the state environmental department for Massachusetts. And he's a survivor of that, and he has now off onto something else, again, bringing his passion to a much larger audience. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Cortese.
I will attempt to show you three things: radically different ways of meeting human needs, what higher education must do and is doing to make that transformation, and action steps that you and all of us can take to make this a reality. In the past 2 centuries, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, world population has jumped from 1 billion to 6.7 billion. Energy consumption has jumped 68-fold, and economic output 80-fold, most of which has occurred during my lifetime. That is staggering and mostly goes unnoticed. Despite all of our heroic efforts at environmental protection, all living systems are in long-term decline. 3 billion people are without sanitation and earn less than $2.50 a day. We are now in the midst of a terrible economic crisis, and there is political instability worldwide. Now, this has happened with 25% of the world's population consuming 75 to 80% of the world's resources. And that is without China and India appropriately raising the quality of life for the majority of its 2.5 billion people. And the challenge that will accelerate all the negative trends is human-induced global warming. Now, despite what you read or hear in the media, as the Grateful Dead said, denial ain't just a river in Egypt. The resulting climate disruption is real and is already affecting us. It is worse and happening faster than predicted by the most conservative scientists just 3 years ago. This graph of ice core data over the last 650,000 years demonstrates the close relationship between average global temperature in white and atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide in blue. Note that the concentration of carbon dioxide hasn't been above 300 parts per million during that entire time. We are now at 388 parts per million, 30% higher than it's ever been. And with business as usual, over the next 50 years, the concentration will reach more than 600 parts per million, twice the maximum over the last 650,000-year period. Now, even if we don't know the exact relationship, do we really want to take the chance that the resulting energy from higher temperatures will be benign? What makes it more difficult to understand and deal with is that today's carbon emissions will begin their full warming effect in 30 to 50 years. In fact, what we're experiencing today came from the emissions that have occurred over the last 150 years. Think about this in the context of an economy that is focused on quarterly earnings and a government that thinks only on the next election cycle. As they said in Apollo 13, Houston, we have a problem. How did we get here? Humans have always viewed the Earth as something to exploit. We are also dominated by linear, short-term thinking and view increasing consumption as the principal measure of success, despite its increasing negative and social impacts. Take photocopying and printing. Most people think that the environmental impact comes from the printer or copier and the paper itself. Well, the real impact is all the way up the supply chain, with energy, resources, pollution, and waste every step of the way, often 1 to 2 orders of magnitude greater than the actual printing. So if you look from the extraction of the materials to the production and manufacturing, to the distribution, and then the use, most of the waste and pollution and waste occurs way upstream, and usually 1 to 2 orders of magnitude greater than we ever see. And this is true of most industrially produced products, foods, and services. For example, my little 5.5-pound laptop computer, it took about 3,000 to 4,000 pounds of material that went into the making of that computer before I ever saw it. And all of it went to waste and was totally invisible to me. So the issue that we have to think about is trying to make what is the invisible visible, because most of the things are invisible to us. Now, you remember the TV game show, The Price is Right, the show in the 50s, where if you guessed the price of an object, you would get it? Well, unfortunately, the price of most products and services is wrong. It doesn't reflect the impact on human health and communities, workers, and the Earth's ecosystems. The best estimate of the true cost of gasoline is $8 to $12 per gallon, including the defense spending to keep the oil flowing from the Middle East. Hundreds of businesses are paying attention to the life cycle of their products through the supply chain. Walmart is now requiring all of its 64,000 suppliers worldwide to report on and minimize their greenhouse gas emissions and reduce the environmental impact of packaging in order to remain a Walmart supplier. In the next few minutes, join me on our journey of hope and possibility. Here is what we know about living sustainably over the long run and the best chance for modern civilization to thrive. We would use as little resources and energy as possible and power the economy with renewable energy. We would move to circular industrial production in which the concept of waste is eliminated because every waste product is a raw material or a nutrient for another activity. We are the only species on Earth whose waste is not a raw material or nutrient for another species. Nature operates in a circular production way, and we need to mimic that for human society. Third, we would live off nature's interest, not its capital. We would use natural resources only at the rate that they can self-regenerate. The idea is embodied in sustainable forestry, fishing, and agriculture. This is the concept of biomimicry, learning from and imitating nature which has figured out what works and survives after 3.4 billion years of experimentation. Now, if you want to learn more about these exciting ideas and how they're being applied in industry all around the world, go to biomimicry.net. Biomimicry.net. This concept is being pursued in hundreds of businesses and must become a framework of education. For example, DuPont has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions 72% over 1990 levels and saved $4 billion. How will we make this transformative shift in thinking and action? How will we make it second nature for society? Higher education must lead the way because it educates all of society's leaders, the business people and professionals, including all the K-12 teachers, and produces the most credible research as part of its core mission to serve society. To do so, it must be a part of all education, regardless of what students major in. It should practice what it teaches, using the campus as a living laboratory for sustainable living, and connect that to the classroom learning, and also help local and regional communities and businesses become socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable. Now, the great news is that there's been literally an explosion of action on campuses in the last 5 to 10 years. From new environmental and sustainability majors across many science, social science, business, and engineering programs, to modeling sustainability, energy and water conservation, renewable energy, waste minimization and recycling, green buildings and purchasing, alternative transportation, making the campuses more bicycle and pedestrian friendly, local and organic food growing and sustainable purchasing, saving both the environment and money, and providing a new way for students to understand how to live better. And the greatest news from my perspective is that the students have often been driving this force. They've been the driving force on these campuses. In fact, I would argue that the student environmental movement today is the most significant student movement since the anti-war movement of the 1960s. And frankly, they're more sophisticated and better at it than we were. They've rolled up their sleeves. They figure out ways to do it. Some, in many schools, they're actually paying for some of these changes. For bus passes or for renewable energy, it's rather remarkable. There is an even greater beacon of light for this systemic change. In February of 2007, 12 college and university presidents, including David Shai, president of Furman University, working with Second Nature, launched the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. It is a high-visibility, joint and individual commitment to reduce and eventually neutralize campus greenhouse gas emissions, to develop the capability of students to help all of society do the same, and publicly report on their progress. That's important. Transparency is important. As of today, just 3 years later, 675 colleges and universities in all 50 states and the District of Columbia have made this unprecedented commitment. They represent 5.6 million students, about a third of the student population, and include every type of institution, from community colleges to the biggest research universities, Ohio State and Arizona State. They include 15 in South Carolina: Clemson, Furman, the University of South Carolina campuses, the Medical University of South Carolina, the College of Charleston, and Wofford College. This is huge. Higher ed is the first major U.S. sector with a significant number of its members to commit to climate neutrality. This is especially important given the inability of the international community and the U.S. Congress to act. Now, the first 230 campuses have submitted their climate action plans, and the results are very exciting. The first 230 campuses have submitted their climate action plans, and in these next series of slides, I want to show you some of the exciting results. As you look at this, in the top, on the top of the screen, you will see the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and the money that was saved by each individual institution, and the bottom is the cumulative impact. At Ball State University, they've removed their coal-fired boiler for producing the heating and cooling on the campus, and they're going to geothermal energy for all of the buildings on the campus. They're going to reduce their greenhouse gases by 80,000 tons, and they're going to be saving $2 million per year. Los Angeles Community College District, they are going to be completely on solar energy for all of their electricity and the heating and cooling of their buildings by the end of 2011. They're going to reduce their emissions by 21,000 tons a year and save $2.2 million per year. Clemson University, with a whole variety of ways of trying to reduce the energy consumption, retrofitting with lighting, new HVA systems, and others, is going to be reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 18,000 tons and saving $260,000 a year, and that's just one small part of the campus. And finally, Furman University, its North Living campus, its North Living complex is going to be completely on geothermal energy. And it is for 1,000 students, they're going to be reducing their greenhouse gases by about 700 tons a year and saving about $55,000 per year. Now, what we must do is make the impractical or seemingly impossible inevitable, just as President Kennedy did in getting us to the moon. The Earth does not recognize how hard it is for us humans to change. It will respond to the physical changes we cause on its own schedule, in its own ways, and in its own ways. We are like tenant farmers, chopping down the fence around our house for fuel when we should be using nature's inexhaustible sources of energy, the sun, the wind, and the tide. I'd put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. That was Thomas Edison in a published conversation with Henry Ford and Harvey Firestone in 1931. What can you do? Go to the website, presidentsclimatecommitment.org, and see if your school is a signatory to the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. If so, call or write the president and thank him or her. Why? because when people take risks, we should say thank you to them for taking a risk and going out on a limb and doing what is right, even though it may not be the most popular thing to do. If your president has not signed, call or write and ask him to make the commitment for the sake of your children and their grandchildren. Contact your governor and the state legislature and press them to join the 36 other states, including North Carolina, in establishing a requirement for some of the state's electricity to be from renewable energy. This will create some financial incentives for the institutions, businesses, and individuals to increase energy efficiency and use renewable energy. Thank you.